I was 42 when the ground beneath my life finally cracked open. I had been married to Daniel for nearly 2 decades, a man who once made me believe in safe harbors and unshakable vows. We had built a home together in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where kids ride their bikes on summer evenings and neighbors wave over hedges. From the outside, our lives looked enviable: two successful professionals, a tidy house with a manicured lawn, and a marriage that seemed steady, if not particularly passionate anymore. But steadiness, I would learn, can be nothing more than silence covering rot. It began on an ordinary Tuesday. I was in our shared office, a room where his desk faced mine, though he rarely used it since he preferred working late at the firm. He had left his laptop open, a carelessness that felt almost deliberate. Maybe a part of him wanted to be caught. Maybe he was just arrogant. I only know that when I sat down and saw the chat window open, my world tilted. The messages were explicit. Not the kind of harmless flirtation one might dismiss as a mistake, but declarations and promises that cut into me like knives. Last night was unforgettable. I can't believe how easy it is to sneak away when she's right next door. And then the detail that hollowed me out: the name. Sarah, our neighbor. The woman who waved at me every morning as she watered her roses. The woman whose husband Mark often lent us his tools and joined Daniel for beers on the porch. My vision blurred as I scrolled, my breath shallow and erratic. There were weeks of conversations, photos, even plans to meet in hotels when they thought no one would notice. Every word was a betrayal, every emoji a nail in the coffin of what I thought we had. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in the dim office, the ticking clock on the wall, suddenly unbearably loud. Anger surged, first fiery, volcanic, blinding. But beneath it came grief, then humiliation. My husband wasn't just betraying me, he was mocking me right under my nose, and with someone so close we could practically hear their laughter through the walls. That night, Daniel came home as if nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek absently, asked about dinner, talked about a meeting at work. I looked at him across the table and thought, "You have no idea that I know. You have no idea that this time I won't be silent." In the days that followed, I didn't confront him. Instead, I planned. Silence became my weapon. I replayed every smile Sarah had given me, every wave, every polite chat over the fence. I thought of Mark sitting oblivious in his own house while his wife destroyed both our marriages. And I knew what I needed to do. I began by gathering everything Daniel had left lying around: receipts from restaurants. He never took me to hotel bookings under his name. The shirt that smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. Each piece went into a neat pile, evidence, not just of infidelity, but of the story he had written without me. Then one evening, when he was working late, at least that was his excuse, I took out the suitcases. I packed his clothes, his shoes, his toiletries. I didn't do it in anger. I folded everything carefully, placed it neatly as though preparing him for a long trip. But with every shirt I folded, I felt lighter, stronger, as though I was reclaiming something that had been stolen. I called my sister Olivia, the only person I trusted with the truth. She came over, her face tightening with rage when I showed her the messages. "You deserve better than this, coward," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. When I told her my plan, her eyes widened, but then she nodded. "Do it. Let him live with the consequences. Don't protect him anymore." So on a Saturday morning, I wheeled the suitcases out of the garage, the sun bright and almost mocking in its cheerfulness. Olivia followed me in her car just in case. My heart pounded as I pushed those bags across the street, the sound of the wheels against the pavement sharp in the quiet air. Neighbors trimmed their hedges, and kids rode past on bikes, oblivious to the storm brewing. I stopped in front of the Hendersons' door, Sarah and Mark's house. My palms were slick with sweat, but my grip on the handles was firm. Olivia gave me a small nod from her car, and I pressed the doorbell. The door opened, and there stood Mark holding a mug of coffee, his face breaking into a friendly smile. That smile faltered as he looked down at the suitcases. His eyes lifted back to mine, confusion furrowing his brow. "These belong to your wife's lover," I said, my voice low but steady. And with that, I handed him the truth. Mark's hand froze on the suitcase handle, his coffee mug trembling in the other. For a moment, he didn't speak, as though his mind refused to connect the words I had just said with the man he thought he knew. His eyes flicked from the bags to my face, searching for some sign that this was a cruel joke, but my expression didn't waver. "There, Daniels," I said more firmly, my voice steady, though my chest was tight. "You'll find everything you need inside: receipts, messages, proof. I thought you deserved to know just as I did." The color drained from his face. He set the mug down on the porch railing with a clatter, the coffee sloshing over the rim. Then he opened one of the bags, rifling through the shirts until his hand landed on the folder I'd placed on top. He pulled out the stack of printed messages, his eyes scanning, his lips tightening with each line. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "All this time?" Behind him, I caught sight of Sarah in the hallway. She was barefoot, her hair tousled, wearing one of Daniel's shirts. The sight made my stomach twist, but I forced myself not to look away. Her eyes widened as she realized what I had done, and her face went pale, then red. "Emma," she started, stepping forward. But Mark cut her off, his voice shaking with fury. "Don't. Not a word." He turned back to me, his expression now sharp with a mixture of heartbreak and gratitude. "Thank you for telling me. I should have seen it. But thank you." Neighbors had started to notice. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. Whispers floated across lawns. In a neighborhood where gossip traveled faster than light, this scene would spread by dinner. And that, I realized, was part of the point. Daniel and Sarah had thought they could keep their affair neatly hidden. But now their shame would be visible to everyone. Sarah's voice rose behind Mark, desperate, defensive. "It's not what you think. She's twisting everything." But Mark slammed the suitcase shut with a finality that silenced her. He turned, shoving it into the hallway, the thud echoing like a verdict. Then he looked back at me. "You've done more than enough. Go home, Emma. I'll deal with this now." I nodded, my throat tight with a mix of sorrow and grim satisfaction. As I walked back across the street, I didn't look behind me, though I could hear Sarah's frantic pleas and Mark's low, furious voice carrying into the afternoon air. Olivia got out of her car and walked beside me, her hand brushing mine in quiet solidarity. By the time I reached my driveway, Daniel's car was pulling in. Perfect timing. He stepped out smiling like he always did, as though his double life were perfectly intact. But then he noticed the empty space in the garage where his bags had been. His brow furrowed, his eyes darted to me. "Where are my things?" he demanded, suspicion sparking in his tone. I met his gaze, letting the silence stretch until his jaw tightened. "Finally," I said. "Across the street. Where they belong." His face drained of color. He glanced toward the Hendersons' house, where voices still rose, neighbors now openly staring. For the first time, Daniel looked small to me, not the powerful man who had once held my heart, but a coward caught in the light. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stormed past me into the house. I let him go. There was nothing left to say. That night I slept alone in our bed, the silence heavy but strangely peaceful. For years I had feared betrayal would destroy me. But as I lay there, I realized something startling: it hadn't. The truth had hurt, yes, but it had also freed me. And Daniel's reckoning was only just beginning. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing like a hive disturbed. I could feel it the moment I stepped outside to water the flowers. Eyes peered from behind curtains, whispers rippled across driveways, and the Hendersons' house stood unnervingly still, its blinds drawn tight. Daniel hadn't come home that night. I imagined him pacing in Sarah's living room, caught between her frantic excuses and Mark's fury. I poured water over the roses with deliberate calm, even as my heart beat faster at every glance from a neighbor. Let them look, I thought. Let them see the truth. For years I had played the role of the composed wife, smiling at block parties, waving in the mornings. But now the facade was gone, and oddly enough, I felt lighter. Daniel stumbled back home around noon. His shirt was wrinkled, his face ashen, and his eyes bloodshot. He slammed the door shut behind him, his voice already raised. "What the hell did you do, Emma?" I set down the watering can and turned to him. "I stopped covering for you." He froze, as though he hadn't expected me to be so direct. "You humiliated me in front of Mark, in front of everyone." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You did that all by yourself. I just handed him what he deserved to know." His anger faltered into something closer to fear. He raked a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. "You don't understand. Mark, he's dangerous when he's angry. You've put us both at risk. No, Daniel, I said quietly, my voice like steel wrapped in silk. You put us at risk when you climbed into Sarah's bed. Don't you dare put that on me. He opened his mouth again, but there was no fight left. Only shame, naked and raw. He stormed upstairs, the thud of his footsteps echoing through the house that suddenly felt too large for the two of us. That afternoon, Olivia came over with groceries. We cooked together in the kitchen like we had when we were teenagers, her presence a balm against the storm. You know he'll try to twist this around on you, she said, chopping vegetables with sharp, decisive strokes. I know, I admitted, sliding the chicken into the oven. But the truth is too big now. He can't twist his way out of this one. And I was right. Within days, the fallout spread. Mark filed for separation, moving into his brother's place across town. Sarah stopped appearing in the yard, her once perfect garden now overgrown with weeds. The whispers in the neighborhood grew louder, carried by pitying glances cast my way. Daniel tried to repair the damage, but every attempt only made things worse. His colleagues learned about the affair through the grapevine, and soon he was left out of meetings, invitations drying up. He blamed me for exposing him, but I reminded him every time that I hadn't created the truth. I had simply refused to hide it anymore. At night, lying awake in bed, I thought about the years I had wasted waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to love me the way he once had. And then I thought of the moment I handed Mark those suitcases, the sharp crack in the facade, the look on Daniel's face when he realized it was over. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt whole. But revenge, I realized, is not the same as healing. Exposing Daniel had given me justice, yes, but it hadn't filled the hollow ache of betrayal. That part I would have to mend myself. And soon I knew I would have to make the hardest decision of all, whether to keep living under the same roof as the man who broke me or to finally set myself free. The decision came to me one quiet evening as the sun dipped low and painted the kitchen in shades of orange and gold. Daniel sat across from me at the table, hunched over, his face drawn with exhaustion. He had stopped yelling days ago. The anger had drained out of him, replaced by something weaker, pleading excuses, empty promises. Emma, he said softly, staring at his untouched plate. We can fix this. I'll cut it off with Sarah. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't throw everything away. Oh. I looked at him for a long moment. This was the same man who had sworn to love me, who had promised fidelity under a canopy of stars 20 years ago. And yet here he was begging for scraps of the marriage he had carelessly torn apart. Everything was already thrown away, I said quietly. You just didn't notice until now. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time I felt no pity, only clarity. The next morning I called my lawyer. Filing for divorce was terrifying in its finality, but also liberating. I thought I would feel grief as I signed the papers, but instead there was a strange peace. The kind that comes after a storm has finally broken. Word spread quickly, as it always does. Neighbors who had once whispered behind curtains now approached me with awkward sympathy. Some praised my courage, others shook their heads in scandal. But their opinions no longer mattered. For the first time in years, my life was no longer defined by Daniel's choices. Mark reached out to me once a few weeks later. We met at a cafe on the other side of town, away from the prying eyes of the neighborhood. He looked older, wearier, but there was a quiet strength in his gaze. Thank you, he said simply, for telling me the truth, for not letting me live in ignorance. We sat for an hour talking about betrayal, about loss, about the strange kinship born from shared wounds. There was no romance in it, no hidden spark, just two people who had been broken by the same storm, finding solace in each other's company. At night in my now empty house, I walked from room to room, remembering the life I had built and the life I was leaving behind. It hurt, of course. There were nights when I cried until my body ached, when I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I had wasted my best years on a man who never truly saw me. But there were other nights when I opened the window and let the cool air wash over me. Nights when I felt the quiet hum of freedom settle into my bones. Those nights reminded me that I wasn't just losing something, I was gaining something too. Myself. Daniel moved out soon after, his presence reduced to the occasional letter from his lawyer, or the faint echo of his name in the neighborhood gossip. Sarah disappeared almost entirely. The Hendersons' house went up for sale within months, a for sale sign standing like a monument to the wreckage they had made. And me, I started over, slowly, painfully, but with intention. I took long walks alone, traveled to places I had always dreamed of, filled journals with words I had once been too afraid to write. I rebuilt piece by piece until one day I realized I no longer woke up with his betrayal as the first thought in my mind. Revenge had been my weapon, but healing became my victory. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever stood in the ashes of something you thought would last forever, I want you to hear me. You are not powerless. You can choose truth over silence, dignity over despair, freedom over fear. So, if my story resonated with you, if you found strength in the fire the way I did, please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And leave a comment, tell me how you found your way back to yourself. Because no betrayal has the power to define you unless you let it.